So this is the last stuff. Look at this, x minus 9 squared. This is a perfect square right here. So remember when there was a shortcut for it, but if you forgot the shortcut and you were foiling, you could always just write it twice and FOIL it out. So if you did the first terms, you'd have x times x is x squared. Outside you'd have negative 9x. Inside you'd have another negative 9x. And the last negative 9 times negative 9 would be positive 81. So you simplify that. The middle ones you can combine, and it would be x squared minus 18x plus 81. This is what we're trying to make happen here. We're trying to eventually turn these into these perfect square trinomials here. So the way you're going to figure that out is if you look at this middle term, this minus 18x, and you look at what we started at, it's minus 9. It's just that middle term divided by 2, right? And the last term is that second term squared. Negative 9 times negative 9 gives you 81. So you know how to find all the parts now. If you're going for that last term, you just take half of that. And then if you're going for this last term, you just square that. Great. So find the value of c that makes x squared plus 6x plus c a perfect trinomial. So remember, if we are looking for c, the way we can do that is we cut this in half, 6 divided by 2, and then after we cut it in half, we're going to square it. So I think the original formula for this says b over 2 squared. So 6 divided by 2 is 3, and then 3 squared would be 9. So c would have to be 9. So let's just replace that there. Boom, done. Now on the next one, we're going to be doing that, but then we're going to have to write it as a binomial squared. And it's just as easy. We'll start with the one we just did. So there's ways you can find it. The square root of x squared is x. The square root of 9 is 3. So it would just be x plus 3 squared. Or another easy way to find it is just divide this term by 2. Whatever we had here before we squared it. So that would be written as a binomial squared, which is what we're going to do for this last example. Complete the square and write the expression as a binomial squared. So x squared minus 2x plus blank. To find the blank, we're going to take b, we're going to divide it by 2, and then we're going to square it. So negative 2 divided by 2 is negative 1, and then negative 1 squared would be positive 1. Great. Now, remember, whatever you have here, after you divide by 2, that's what goes into the binomial squared. So it would just be x minus 1 squared, right? Because we had the minus 1 there. And again, if you want to check, write that out twice and FOIL it, and you'll get x squared minus 2x plus 1. Now something like b is a little more challenging, because if I take 5 and I divide it by 2, I have a fraction, and that's okay. That's fine. Now check this out. We already know part of our answer here. It'll be x plus this, right? Because we can't simplify that anymore. So remember, before we squared it, that was part of the binomial squared. So this will be x plus 5 halves squared. That'll be part of our final answer. But we still need to figure out what c is. So we actually need to square it still. When you square a fraction, you square each part. 5 squared is 25. 2 squared is 4. So we're going to leave it written like that. So you cut b in half, you divide by 2, and then you square it to get c on every one of these. Cut it in half, square it. Now, after you cut it in half, that number will go right there with the x to make it a binomial squared.